Awesome. Camera is on. You may begin.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer, and our question today was what's going on with MMIW.
My name is Nicola Damaris. I am from the Termon Reservation, but I live in Bismarck.
My name is Candace. I'm originally from the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe.
And I'm Jennifer. I'm from the Fallon Page Shoshone Tribe of Fallon, Nevada.
Bobby Bird from Twin Peaks on Fort Worth Reservation.
I'm Brandon Everett. I'm from the MHA Nation.
Okay, I guess I'm number one. Hello, everybody. My name's Bobby. I'm here to talk to you about the psychological aspect of MMIW. And so when I'm talking to you, keep in mind it's about psychology. And if you get confused, remember I'm talking about psychologists. Okay. Through my research, I found an article in Synopsis Canada Psychology magazine called Reclaiming Power and Place, the final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. MMIW has no real voice. People have been talking to the authorities for years now, and it's taken until 2019 for authorities in Canada to get serious about MMIW. It was important for the agencies to start a truth-gathering process, starting with statements from survivors and their families of victims. Families of the victims. Psychologists are just now starting to understand their experiences. The success from the report was how survivors and their families came forward publicly to tell their story. A report was made and 4 steps were recommended for calls for justice. 1, a historical, multi, and intergenerational trauma. 2, social and economic marginalization. 3, maintaining the status quo and institutional lack of will. 4, ignoring the agency and expertise of Indigenous women. I know that change that established institutions need is a difficult one. The change is poorly understood by psychologists and their mental health professionals. They don't understand what needs to be changed. Effective change for a complex issue takes time. Several mental health psychologists fell short with diagnosis or care of the victims. Maybe a more knowledgeable psychologist could learn about colonialism, racism, and an understanding of Native healing and culture practices. Change requires courage, commitment, and starting somewhere, even when problems and their solutions are complex. It is important that the messages from MMIW families are heard, and the psychologists and their colleagues need to be more proactive and willing to be taught new techniques. As the number of MMIW rises, the agencies involved have to be more effective in their process.
We forgot to say some of our definitions.
Oh.
Some of our definitions are the Savannah Act. It was a bipartisan effort to improve the federal response to missing or murdered Indigenous persons, MMIP, including by increasing coordination among federal, state, tribal, and local government enforcement agencies. MMIW stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. We will be talking about urban communities, which are locations with high population density of Native Americans. Native American / Indigenous reservations, we didn't want, some of the articles called them Indian reservations, but we didn't want to call them that. So they're a federal Indian reservation is an area of land reserved for a tribe or tribes under treaty or other agreement with the United States. Executive order or federal statute or administrative act as permanent tribal homelands, and where the federal government holds title to the land in trust on behalf of the tribe.
For my summary, I found an interesting article about the positive side of negative situations. It basically starts with, in 1989, message speaking to an enduring optimism in popular culture emerged in the form of Bobby McFerrin's Don't Worry, Be Happy. You know the song, Don't Worry. McFerrin's melody won Song of the Year at the 31st Grammys, but happiness isn't everything, and sometimes it's not even the best thing. Often, emotions such as sadness and anger and anxiety can make emotions like happiness and joy seem like the best place to be well. Contrary to this, researchers have found that there may be potential positive effects of negative emotions. Results of one study found that when facing a threat, people who lack fear or anger may be at a disadvantage because their bodies are not ready for a fight. Another study reported individuals in negative moods are usually more creative because they are motivated to exert high levels of effort and persistence to make changes versus people who are more positive. For example, in one Ontario middle school, educators worked with Indigenous elders to develop a Red Feather project, in which all students studied the cases of more than 1,000 missing or murdered Indigenous women, wrote each woman's name on a red feather. They hung the feathers from a tree in their town square to raise awareness about MMIW. One of the teachers at the middle school stated, "To be there that day was beautiful because there were so many members of the community there. There were members from the First Nations community. There was a real coming together." On the other side of the border in the U.S., the organization Facing History and Ourselves, through its lessons on harrowing topics such as the Atlantic slave trade and the Holocaust, really exemplifies how schools can engage with difficult issues. Because the curriculum shows how everyone can speak out against injustice, both students and teachers report feeling empowered as a result of their participation. That is just some of the findings from the article that I found.
What is happening with the MMIW? An article written by Josephine Saversi titled "Challenging Colonial Norms and Intending to Presence in Stories of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women." Her reason for writing this article was to give a deeper consideration to ongoing Indigenous resistance and the challenges it presents to the settler state's precarious hold on Indigenous lives. Specifically, she works to illustrate Leanne Simpson's concept of presencing through the lives of two Indigenous women, 35-year-old Keanu James and 20-year-old Amber Takaro. Examining cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women from a presencing lens may help show the light in those who have been taken. Though destabilizing colonial truths won't be easy. In Simpson's article, some important goals were realized, setting out preliminary findings on presencing when extreme trauma has occurred, and explaining ways Simpson's research that might support and propel justice reforms because it applies relatively new terminology coined by Simpson. This investigation may have implications beyond the incidents under review. Focusing on the stories of the MMIW, Josephine Saversi believes Amber Dean's urgent call for today's settler societies to contemplate how the past is everywhere evident in the present-day making of our social world, and that we fully acknowledge how this relates to questions about justice in the present.
Thank you.
So mine is MMIW in urban communities. So in urban communities in the U.S., there's a scarce amount of information on missing and murdered Indigenous women. Anita Lisecci, she's a researcher for the Urban Indian Health Institute. She believes that MMIW narrative is much more focused on reservations and exclude urban communities. Anita comes from the Cheyenne people. She lives off her reservation. In her lifetime, she has been sexually assaulted twice in the Bay Area and in Albuquerque. She also is a survivor of life-threatening domestic violence, and she was also trafficked in Spokane. Anita and her co-author, Abigail Echohawk, spent a year requesting data from police departments from 71 cities around the country and found that MMIW victims go missing 3 times in their life, in the media, and in the data. Another surprising fact they found in their research was that data was incomplete due to racial misclassification. According to the interview on NPR, Anita says, Fargo police told us that if an officer doesn't enter the victim's race, the system defaults to white. She believes if law enforcement agents are willing to amend their protocol for entering a victim's race, establishing a connection with the victim's family and communities, and digitalizing archived case files can help give a more accurate statistic in urban communities. And so, out of her report, which is published, if you go online, you can look anywhere, and you see the girl with the ribbon dress and it has the information on there, that's from her report. So I made a sign out of it, right now. So this is MMIW, the Urban Indian Health Institute. So there was 509 cases she found. There were unidentified cases across 71 selected urban cities. Out of 509, 128 were the missing cases of Indigenous women. Out of 509, 280 were murdered cases of Indigenous women. 98 out of the 509 was an unknown status. They don't know. They don't know what's going on. And the average age of all these cases is 29. And 4 out of 5 Native women experienced violence, which is pretty shocking. That means there's almost 15 females in here, so 12 of us will experience violence in our lifetime. And then this is the missing and murdered Indigenous. You will notice the hands, that's a pretty international, I want to say, symbol of the missing and murdered. May 5th is the national awareness, although we had one on February 14th, but May 5th is also recognized. And also in the state of North Dakota, it's also in there for May 5th.
Thank you.
So for my summary, it's not a solution, it's part of the solution. So the epidemic of missing Indigenous women continues to be astounding. Like she said, there's not full statistics that you can find. Some of the research we found only dates to 2018. It doesn't date newer. It feels like people aren't really doing more research into it. It's kind of faded. There happens to be an acronym for missing murdered Indigenous women, which happens to be MMIW. Our government and society need to do a better job of caring for Indigenous peoples. They really aren't doing a good job. No one's going out of their way to look for us. If we were white, we would be looked for. You see all these cases going around of white younger women go missing and they're found. They're not murdered. They may have trauma, but they can live through it. Us, we're not looked for, we're not found. We have no idea what's happened to us. There remains to be no real number for correcting out there women who are currently missing. For years, there was no ability to work with federal government on collaborating efforts in the missing persons investigation. There happens to now be a law, not just the native country, but the United States, for the collaborating effort of tribal, federal, state, and local law enforcement. The act is called the Savannah Act. The act was drawn up because of the murder of Savannah LaFontaine Braylon in Fargo, North Dakota. She was 7 months pregnant and lured by her neighbor to her apartment to try to dress. She was then murdered after having her unborn baby cut from her. The Savannah Act passed through the Senate in March 2020, House of Representatives in September 21st, 2020, and Congress on October 20th of 2020. According to the article, the Act aims to improve data collection of missing and murdered Native Americans, clarifying the responsibility of each individual agency and the response in cases of missing or murdered Native Americans. That is not a solution. It is part of the solution, but for there to be more awareness, more everything, there needs to be a solution. There needs to be a thing that you go from here to here to here, and the act is only, I'd say, in the middle. We have a lot more to do on this. Some of those solutions that we came up with, that we were talking about, are digitalizing case files in MMIW to give a more accurate number.
The second one is being aware of surroundings. For a lot of women, we're so busy in our lives, we don't really pay attention to what's going on. We're worried about day-to-day things that sometimes, our mind can be aware where we are. And actually, I seen online just last night, so like 2 nights ago, these 2 Indigenous women, they were actually followed by a man just here at the mall, just 2 nights ago. And she had to throw her kids in the car, lock the door, and he was trying to get in. So a police report was filed, but nothing to come of it, still under investigation. So that was just very recent.
And they didn't find the man when the police went back to the wall.
Checking in often with family and friends.
Cultural awareness training.
We believe that cultural awareness training for police officers and law enforcement, and just people in general, say you're living in obviously Bismarck. A lot of the police department don't really look for Native Americans in the aspect of helping you. They're looking for us in ways of feeling like we're being targeted. You have a lot of that kind of conversations going on. You speak to someone and they're like, oh, I got pulled over today. Or, oh, hey, this cop followed me for this reason. Not because they want you to feel safe. And I feel like more cultural training of that and knowing oh, hey, this is a certain thing that we do. We may not give you eye contact. It's not because we're afraid of you. It's because women don't look men in the eye, or certain things like that. So knowing more about what's going on.
Also, turning on location on apps or your devices, such as Snapchat, or Apple AirTags. That could be the difference between finding you and not finding you.
And that's kind of what we do.
Any questions from the audience? Okay, let's